Hey, good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to Finish Friday. It's Memorial Weekend, so I know everybody's headed to the lake. Maybe you're watching us, or maybe you're staying home this weekend. It's a staycation. You're going to have a long weekend to be able to do all kinds of projects. That's what Jean and I have planned for this weekend. And I just want to encourage you. I have to give a shout out to Jean. He is so good on holidays like Memorial Day to call my dad and thank him for his service. And I know how so many times my dad has said, he'll tear up and he'll say how much that means to him that somebody took the time to make a phone call and just say thank you for serving, thank you for protecting us. So if you know anybody in your life, maybe it's somebody you haven't talked to in a while, maybe it's an uncle or an aunt or a brother or sister, somebody that spent time in the military to serve and protect our country. Let's call them and tell them thank you for their service. So on this Memorial Day weekend, I want to be able to show you kind of a step up from painting with our one-step paint. People have told me it's called a Boho Chic feel. I call it glazing. It's a way of being able to get a very textured, visually look, not to the touch, but also the layering effect. And it's so easy to accomplish. So remember, this is 12 o'clock Central Standard Time. We're coming to you live from Memphis. This is your opportunity. One, I want to know where you're from. I want you to send me some hearts and some love. And also ask questions. We can't answer all of the questions, but I have two people right here on Instagram, hello, and Facebook, hey, that want to be able to ask me those questions because everybody learns from the questions that you ask. There are no dumb questions. And I'm going to apologize because I'm going to use some analogies today that might be more female oriented. So I'm going to be apologetic to my guys, but I think it will paint the picture for everybody to be able to see the skill that I'm trying to teach you today. You know, these skills and what we do on Finish Friday are like tools in your toolbox for being able to learn finishes, to be able to raise your level of connoisseurship. And as you start to experiment with them, you're going to see it's going to allow you to be able to look at furniture that you're rescuing and restoring much differently, whether you're lacquering it, whether you're using milk paint, or now that you're going to be able to glaze a piece. So these are skills that we're all learning together, and that's why I love teaching you. You are an incredible group of people to teach. Your engagement, your loyalty, really blesses me. And if you are watching this and you do not know about our Amy Howard at home before and after group on Facebook, please join it. It is just an incredible community of people that want to rescue and restore some of the 28 million tons of furniture that we throw away every year. So, and you share your before and afters. You get to enjoy the bragging rights. That's the whole point. But also we help answer questions and help each other along the way. All right, so we do have a bundle this week that I want to share with you. That we have the glazing liquid. We have a bag of lint-free rags that I talk about all the time. And we have a beautiful copper glazing brush. This is a solid copper right here that holds all these beautiful natural bristles together. It is a beautiful, beautiful brush that you will use for many years to come. So our glazing liquid is a water-based glazing liquid that you can use with a lot of things, not just one-step paint. You can use it with mica powders. You can use it with a lot of different things, but today we're focusing on using it with our one-step paint to make kind of a boho chic glazed look. So I want to show you, I'm going to set this aside, I'm going to show you a finish. Let's look at this kind of closely if you can see it. Now, something that I want you to notice, it has a lot of depth. It's hard with these cameras and when we're doing these lights here, but see how there's a shadowing around this piece. Let me show you a piece of furniture. It's not the same exact color, but see on this piece how you've got, this doesn't have the texture that this does in the center and the carving. But see how there's the shadowing effect around this piece of furniture. This is kind of a boho chic or a glazing that we're going to show you how to do today. And there is a very easy process. It's about 3 steps. But you're going to see that this here, let me turn this around. I want you to kind of see the stages. So on this particular sample, the first color that I did to achieve this, it was painted with Bauhaus Buff. It's really important to know that you've got, if you want a color like this, you're going to start with the lightest color that's kind of peeking through, which is Bauhaus Buff. That's this right here. Bauhaus Buff is our #1 selling color in the entire Amy Howard Home line. So we're going to paint our entire piece with the one-step paint. And then the color that I chose, which you're going to probably go, that doesn't even look anything like that. I painted it with the Bauhaus Buff, which is this. I already have it open. I mixed up a glaze with the glazing liquid with Vintage Affliction. I love this color. I love the name Vintage Affliction. I'm afflicted by vintage things. So it makes sense, and most of you are, so we're kindred spirits in that sense. So I used Vintage Affliction as my glaze. That, you can see the glaze on top of that. Some of you may go, ooh, I love just that. I would love to be able to just have that look. Well, that's great. I'm going to show you how to do that today. But then doing a second glaze and shadowing it takes us to this point. So that way, here's your base coat, here's your first glaze, and then your second glaze. So I know y'all are going, wait a minute, what is she talking about? I don't understand that. Well, that's why I'm here. That's why I'm going to explain this to you. So the first thing that we've done, we've painted our piece all over with 1 or 2 coats of Bauhaus Buff. We're going to allow it to dry, and then we're going to take our glazing liquid and we're going to make a glaze. Now, let's say you don't want to do the blue. Let's say you want to do it in a gray. You can. The same thing. Whether it's a gray, whether it's going to be maybe a pale yellow, maybe you want to do a pink, maybe you can do that. The main thing that I want you to remember is the fact that I don't want your colors to go too severe. That we talk about light reflective value. Light reflective value, LRV. And that is the differences as far as going from too light to too dark. You want to stay pretty close. You think about on the gradation on your paint deck colors when you're fanning those out. You want to make sure that you go from a light, maybe 2 steps up, to a little bit darker. I don't want you to go from the lightest to the darkest when you're mixing a color. The other thing is you can mix your own colors in this, but that's why I'm showing you as far as using our Bauhaus Buff as your base coat and then the Vintage Affliction, which you see it almost looks nothing like this, and you're going to see why in just a minute. So the first thing you're going to do is I'm going to take my glazing liquid. Now here's your formula. 2 parts glazing liquid, 2 parts water, 1 part paint. 2 parts glazing liquid, 2 parts water, 1 part paint. That's going to make you a nice thin glaze to be able to put on top of your piece of furniture. The other thing I want you to do is I want you to work on it in sections. So when you're glazing it, after you've painted the whole thing, you're going to glaze the top. You're going to take out the drawers. If you're doing a nightstand, you're going to just do that 1 drawer. And I usually like to take it out and set it down and work on it so I have control over it so I can start it and end it pretty quickly. Same thing if you're working on the side of the piece. I would prefer you lay the piece on its side and that way work on the side so you have complete control. Don't try to think about the piece in its entirety. Take it 1 section at a time. That way you're going to have more control over the glazing. Are there any questions so far? Everybody's with me? Everybody gets it? Then say, I get it. I'm with you, Amy. We understand. So here's kind of the analogy as we talk about glazing. And guys, because I have a lot of great guys that follow us and that use our products and do an incredible job and share a lot of before and afters, and I thank you for that. But I'm going to use an analogy for the ladies for just a second. So as far as glazing and as far as blending, when you put on your eyeshadow, when you put on your eyeshadow, you'll normally do a light color first. And then you come in and you do a darker color in the crease and then you blend it. If you did a darker color first and you don't have that lighter color, there's a real contrast. The same thing is going to happen when you're doing your glazing. So let me explain what I'm talking about. All right, so I'm going to mix it up. I'm going to take 2 parts of the glaze. I'm going to take 2 parts water. And then I'm going to do 1 part paint. Cool thing about it is, let me get just a little bit more, my spoon wasn't as full. Cool thing about it is these are all water-based. There are no VOCs in this glazing liquid, guys, and it's all water-based. And there's no VOCs in our paint. It's all water-based. So you'll notice the glaze is white, which you can see when I poured it out. The glaze is white, but it's going to go clear when you mix it up with your color. Stir it up. When you're getting ready to do your project, make sure you mix up enough glaze to be able to do your entire piece. That's what's so great about these little sample pots. This sample pot will do a fairly large dresser. It'll be plenty of glaze because the majority of the thing that you're going to use is your glazing liquid in your water. All right, so I'm going to mix that up. I'm going to get my glazing. I am going to need another brush. You're going to need a chip brush to work in combination with the glazing brush. So I'm going to mix my glazing liquid up just a little bit more. Now you will have to agitate this as you're working on it. Like if you're working on your piece and you walk away, maybe after 20 minutes, a half an hour, this may settle down and you just want to agitate it just a little bit more to make sure it's all mixed up. I'm going to offload it just a little bit. Remember, we do that just like we do our wax. We just want to make sure that everything is all blended well on our brush. The other thing we want to do is make sure you've got a nice big rag to be able to work with. The lint-free rag, which comes in that bundle. Now, on this first glaze, we're going to do 2 glazes. On this first glaze, we're going to go over the whole thing. So you'll pounce it in, and you're going to need to work fairly quickly. So let's say if we're working on the drawer to our piece, we're working on the side, we're working on the top. I want you to go fairly quickly. Pounce it in, and then kind of feather it out like this. Don't do a whole lot, because you're going to be taking this off. All right, now I want you to come back with your rag, and it's a hit drag motion. Look at that. See how soft that is? Now, out come the glasses. I gotta see this and make sure I'm showing you right. So now I want you to come back. You're working quickly the whole time. I'm working on my top, I'm working on the drawer, whatever area that I'm working on. It might be a corbel. I want you to now get a second brush. It needs to be dry. It does not need to be wet. This is what we call a negative tool. When we're applying the paint, it's a positive tool. When we're taking it off, it's a negative tool. So come back in here. Do you see the difference? Is that showing up? See how I'm taking that out? I'm pouncing it because I want to get it out of the crevices. This first pass is another word that we're calling it. This first pass is just like that. Done. Boom. Booyah, as we say. So it's going to dry. It's going to take about 15 or 20 minutes for this to dry. It's going to dry down to a matte finish. You're hardly going to see it. Now here, this is what it dried down to. All right? Is everybody with me? Are there any questions? There are questions now, okay?
Does the glaze also act as a sealer?
The glaze does act as a sealer, but remember, here's one of, who asked that question?
Renee Mayer.
Hey, Renee. I love the fact that I have the smartest followers. I have the smartest people that refinish furniture and that follow us, so thank you. That's a great question. But remember, it does act as a sealant, and a lot of people, if you go in and you're doing, you're glazing walls, which the same process that I'm showing you, you can do on walls. You can paint your wall, Bauhaus buff, and you can come back and glaze it to look just like this on your wall. So you would use the glazing liquid and the water. Same effect. But, and here's the great thing about the one-step paint, you don't have to seal it. You know, there are other chalk-based paint companies that you have to put wax on it or you have to seal it, because if you don't, the finish will come off. Ours is not that way. You do not have to seal the one-step paint. You also don't have to prime it or sand it. It goes on, it's beautifully. That's how we formulated it. But the glazing liquid does act as a beautiful protectant. You can scrub it. If you do this on your cabinets, you can easily scrub it. You can use Windex, you can clean it. It's beautiful. So you can also, let's say you paint your floors. You can glaze your floors. If you tape them off and you're doing maybe diamonds, you can mix up a glaze just like this and do different colors. Are you with me? It's not just for furniture. This whole aspect of mixing colors and layering darker colors and different values over a lighter base is good on a lot of different surfaces and projects. Sorry, long answer, great question. Any more? Any more questions? Come on, Instagram, what's going on? Everybody's out, they're driving to the beach. Okay. Get some sun for me. I'm sure I'll be outside pulling weeds this weekend, but I bet I'll have my yard. All right, so now I'm going to do the second thing. We've got this first coat on. It's dried about 15 or 20 minutes. It's gone down to a beautiful matte finish. Now, let's look at our picture again of our little piece of furniture that I have. I just want to show you. See how you're going to go on the around the edges and kind of shadow it and make it darker? So, I'm going to come back and I'm going to stay around the outside primarily. I'm just going to pounce this. Now, I want you to be really careful not to create, I don't want it to be a circle. I want it to be soft. So I may come back with my other chip brush and just kind of feather it in a little bit. And part of the reason why I do two glazes, this is big news, guys. The reason I do two glazes is because if I was coming on top of my white and just trying to shadow the outside, it's going to be way too contrasty. That way, if I do this first, that's why I told you about the eyeshadow. It's like just a little bit of glaze over that first and then come back with the darker color. It's a lot more natural looking. Okay. Can you see the difference? See the shadowing? Now, let's go back. Here is the, here's the finish that I was showing you. All this is the Boho Buff with a light glaze over the whole thing, and then I came back with a little darker glaze in the areas that I wanted to be able to add a little bit more accent. And if I want to, I could come in here just a little bit. If you want to come around in the center, you can. Don't overdo it because then you've glazed the whole thing. And then I'm going to get my lint-free rag and I'm just going to soften it just a little bit. Like this. See the shadowing and how pretty it is? It's setting me up to be able to do my light and my dark wax. So I want this to dry for just a second. And I'm going to show you, let's say you have a piece, you have something that's ornamental like this, and you want to be able to glaze it, let's say maybe a gray color. So y'all know this is one of my favorite colors. It's one of our best-selling colors. It's called A Good Man Is Hard to Find, which is what I named after Gene Howard. He has gorgeous gray hair. So I'm going to take a little bit of my gray. Remember, it's 1 part paint, 2 parts water, and 2 parts glaze. So I'm going to mix my glaze up again. Every time you go to it, either shake it up or stir it up because it will settle as well. Great thing is, though, this glaze has no VOCs in it. Stir this up. You need to be careful because I'm going pretty dark with this over this Boho Buff color. Am I good on questions?
There's a question on Instagram.
Okay.
Can I use this technique on ceramic tile?
Yes, you know why? Because you can paint ceramic tile with the one-step paint. So you absolutely can. Love that question. Yes. All right, so look. I'm just coming back. Main thing is that you need to remember, you've got to work fast. I'm pouncing it, and then I'm kind of spreading it out. I can come back and shadow it the second time, but this first time I want you to get coverage everywhere. So pounce it, smooth it out. Look how far that glaze went. Yes.
We have another question. If you wanted a softer color, could you add Bauhaus buff to the glaze?
Absolutely. Absolutely. You mean mixing the colors, right? Okay, yes. All right, so remember, as far as what I'm showing you, look how fast I'm working, how I'm moving my rag around, kind of in a hit drag. What's the next thing we do? We're gonna come back, make sure you have a dry brush. I realize I said that real southern, dry. Look how I'm coming back and pouncing that and softening it. Guys, this is a big tip, look at that. See how that's all puddled up in there? Watch that, done, boo, booyah. Soften it. Pardon me?
Most glaze I've used has a sheen. Is your glaze a matte finish or a glossy finish?
It's more of a matte finish, which is what I love. My gloss, I want to come from my wax. I like having a matte finish. Can you tell by how that's drying down to a matte finish? So that way, it's actually gonna look more authentic. I'm all about authenticity, about antiques, things that are old and vintage. I don't want the sheen. That's why I love my glaze so much. So, doesn't that have a cool look? Can you kind of see that? So from going from being, I've got to go back around and check my edges and just make sure they're all tuned in to where that's my first pass. So once that dries, you see how fast it dries. Make sure it's dried to tack so it won't double process on you. Double processing is when it's dry and you try to go back in and you keep working it and it'll lift it. But that's why I want you to work on one section at a time, get that laid down and model it off. Then that way you can come back that second time. I need to let this dry just a little bit longer. That way you can come back the second time and shadow it. And so the outside of this, are you getting me where I'm going? Are you seeing it, guys? Pull away so they can kind of see it. So that way, I'm just gonna shadow the outside of this piece with this gray because I want it to just be a little darker value than what's inside. And I'll pounce that off. But that's why this is like the dark eyeshadow part that just shadows it. Love that. That way I could come around in here if I wanted to with maybe a little gold leaf. This could be a really sweet piece. But it's all gonna start with your base coat of your base coat of Bauhaus Buff. So you see, I can use even a darker color like this with the Bauhaus Buff. Just let it come to tack, soften it, and then come in. And then you're gonna wanna finish with some wax. So I'm gonna set this aside for just a second. Now, this is the piece that I did earlier. I need to hurry up because I'm very respectful of y'all's, want to be respectful of y'all's time. And then it's two parts. Let's look at the sample that I had done earlier. Now, I'm telling you, the wax acts as a finisher. It kind of pulls it all together. It softens it. So you do want to make sure you work with a chip brush. Always have a piece of cardboard to be able to offload it. When I'm doing antiquing, I always use pucks. I know I love, as most of y'all, I love the squeezable waxes that we have, but when I'm antiquing, I always use the pucks. This has the carnauba wax in it that makes it harden really hard, and it makes for a really durable surface. But it also has that coloring in it. That's natural beeswax. We mixed the two, so it gives you a little bit of an antiquing look. Now, so I'm gonna come back. Don't use too much, guys. Look how I'm just kind of feathering over on top of this. Get that hair out of there. Look how I'm constantly turning my wrist, pouncing it down in there, feathering it out. It's real light. It's not too heavy. You also want to make sure that this dries. Here's the other mistake, and I go over this, but maybe it's good that I keep going over it and keep going over it. You've got to allow this to come to tack. When you touch this wax before we do this final process, after you've glazed a piece. Now remember, you don't have to glaze it, you don't have to wax it if you don't want to. You can glaze things and make them darker, and they look great. They're this beautiful matte old look, But if you want to kind of raise it up to another level, the wax and the antiquing process can really add a lot of depth and the patina to it. That way you can have the highs and lows. When you buff it just a little bit, it'll have a little bit of sheen, and then it'll have that matte finish on, down in another area on the piece. So I love it. But here's the mistake a lot of people make. Is that they put the light wax on and then they go right into that dark wax. And what happens when you do that? It blends. So you literally get a third color wax and you lose your depth. The whole idea of the dark wax is what? Is to be able to add a little bit of age and a little bit of detail. You should probably do no more than 10 to 12% of this. The fastest way to ruin a project is to put too much dark wax on. This dark wax will last you for probably a dozen, 15, 20 projects. That's how little I want you to use of this. But remember, these guys are married. This is me. This is Jean. Or I'm willing to be that. What would be more appropriate, Jean? Anyway, these guys are married. So they work together. They work together and they make a beautiful product. So we've got to be able to know, I cannot use this by itself. This one can be used by itself. The light antique wax can be, but if you want to antique it, you always use this first. Always, always, always. Do never use this by itself. Yes?
What about larger expanses of wood furniture that does not have a lot of embellishment?
You can still do glazing because I glaze walls. So absolutely, it's beautiful. Let's go back to my picture again that I was just showing you, worn y'all out with this picture because there's tons of other examples. But see, this is a large flat surface. There's no really embellishments on that. So absolutely, glazing works great on all those things. You can do an armoire, you can do a smooth chest. You'll have to practice a little bit beforehand. Remember, I always tell people, go to Restore or Goodwill and get an old door, paint it Bauhaus buff, get your glazing liquid. It's a great buy this weekend as far as getting your glazing brush, the glazing liquid, and your bag of rags, lint-free rags for $29. Come on, guys, that's cheap. So it allows you to be able to go in and that way experiment. Pop some Bauhaus buff in there too, where you can practice, and your color. All right, so I'm going to take another brush. Remember again, I usually like to use my light wax brushes. You can use the clean slate to clean them. This is petroleum based, so you're going to have to use a paint thinner or our clean slate to clean the wax out of the brushes. That is not water based. So I'm going to add just a little bit of dark wax. Load the brush up all the way like this. And what do we always do? We always offload. You want to get to where there's hardly any dark wax left on your brush, but that way it's evenly distributed on there. All right? All right, so last thing, checking my tack. I'm pushing it just a little bit. It needs to dry just another couple of minutes. You could do this tomorrow if you wanted to. You don't have to do it right afterwards. Now, look how very little I'm going to do this. I'm going to come around the edges first. Where would a piece of furniture get old? First, around the edges where you're touching it the most. Are you starting to see this? So soft, guys. I know people kind of get excited and they think a little bit is great, a whole lot is even greater. It's not. You've got to be able to just be very soft about it. Look at this. Look how I'm just kind of coming now into the center. Always go around the outside first. Look how I'm laying my brush on its side. And then I'll just kind of fan over it. Are you seeing it? Is it showing up on camera? I'll come down in here just a little bit, not much, just where it's blended, because I don't want it to look real dark and then there's nothing. I've got to come in and blend it and soften it just a little bit.
Couple of questions.
Yes.
How long does it take the glaze to dry?
For the glaze to dry, it takes about 30 minutes at the most. It's pretty warm in here in the studio. So it's going to dry fairly quickly. Yeah.
What is the open time on the glaze?
The open time is probably 10 minutes, 12 minutes. So that's why I'm saying work on a section at a time. I would work on, if you have an armoire, I'd work on one door. Work on one drawer. I work fairly fast. I lay it in, get my color on, and I'm staying focused and I finish it. If my phone rings, I don't answer it. I make sure that I get that one section done. So if you're just now tuning in today, I need you to go back and watch the beginning. Be sure and do hashtag replay, because I want you to see that the whole process of glazing, if you want to get that boho chic look, it's going to be more successful with a two-part glaze process, not just doing one glaze. It's doing a light glaze overall and then coming back and shadowing it with the same glaze that you made up, just to be able to get a little bit more detail. Yes?
Tony says, is this copper brush new? We haven't seen you use it before.
No, it's not new. I need to use it more. I love it. It's a glazing brush, because I don't show you how to glaze very much. And I'll be honest with you, a lot of people just like using the one-step paint. I have driven people crazy wanting to teach them how to do milk paint, and now people are like, okay, we love the Toscana milk paint so much. So it's like, that's exciting, because I see you want to do more and you want to learn more. And so glazing sometimes can kind of push people over the edge, but hopefully you saw how easy it is, and you'll be using it more. So yes, but we've had that for a while. Facebook, are we good? All right. So last but not least, I am going to take a lint-free rag that you'll get if you get that bundle, and I'm going to buff this. So, so I'm going to come back. It needs to sit for just a few more minutes to come to tack, but because I may lose a little bit of it. But look at this one. I could come back and add probably just a little bit more to this one, but not a lot if you get too much off. But I don't want it to stay this dark. That doesn't look authentic. It needs to just have a little age to it. So a lot of people are like, I've aged it, it still feels kind of tacky, what do I do? It's going to feel kind of tacky. It's never going to come to like a full dry if you've got a lot on there. So I want you to just come back, think about like you're buffing a shoe. So make a wad like this. You need to have a couple of rags, and you're gonna buff it with quite a bit of pressure on your piece, because what happens, that pressure is going to do what? It's going to build and bring up a sheen. Now I'm losing some of the dark wax. That's okay. I put on a little bit of excess so that way I can come back. Are you starting to see the sheen come up just a little bit? But that way it's going to soften it, and it's going to make it look that much more authentic. So like on this piece over here that's had just a couple of minutes to dry, can you see the sheen? So the reason we want that sheen here, but I'm not trying to get down into this crevices and make it look shiny, all because on an antique piece, it would have been the areas that were worn over a period of time, and that touching and that wearing, that's what the oils from our hands would give that patina, P-A-T-I-N-A, everybody knows, that gave it that natural patina look. That's why we use the waxes. That's why it does help as a protectant. But it gives us that beautiful natural sheen to a piece, not to overdo it, but where it looks natural, like over a period of time. So hopefully you enjoyed this little class today on Boho Chic glazing. Please go back and watch it from the beginning, because it's a two-part process, overall glazing, and then come back and shadowing, and then finish up with your light and your dark wax. We've got a great bundle sale for this Memorial weekend, and take advantage of it. And show your projects. If you're not part of the Amy Howard Home Before and After page on Facebook, please join us, because we love seeing all your projects, because it's your turn to enjoy the bragging rights. Have a fantastic weekend, everybody.